So far, we read that the narrator took the sick man to his Pankha Kuli's house to nurse him, as the doctor there was no good. I could not spare much time to nurse the thin man, for I already had 3 cholera patients on my hands. From my servants, I could expect no help, for they were of a different caste to the sufferer, and therefore there was no justification for exposing them to the risk of infection. However, this did not matter, provided I could instill sufficient confidence into the man that my treatment was going to make him well. To this end, I made it very clear to him that I had not brought him into my compound to die and to give me the trouble of cremating him, but to make him well, and that it was only with his cooperation that this could be effected. That first night I feared that in spite of our joint efforts he would die. But towards morning he rallied, and from then on his condition continued to improve, and all that remained to be done was to build up his strength, which cholera drains out of the human body more quickly than any other disease. At the end of the week, he was able to give me his story. The sick man suffers from cholera, which attacked him badly. The narrator believes that his faith in treatment alone can make him survive. He has 3 more cholera patients with him. He makes the sick man believe that he will be cured of his disease. He instills this confidence in the mind of the sick man. Because of his treatment and instilled confidence, this sick man regains his strength and health. At the end of the week, the completely cured man narrates his story. He was a Lala, a merchant, and at one time possessed a flourishing grain business. Then he made the mistake of taking as partner a man about whom he knew nothing. For a few years the business prospered and all went well. But one day, when he returned from a long journey, he found the shop empty and his partner gone. The little money in his possession was only sufficient to meet his personal debts, and bereft of credit, he had to seek employment. This he found with a merchant with whom he had traded, and for 10 years he had worked on 7 rupees a month, which was only sufficient to support himself and his son, his wife having died shortly after his partner robbed him. He was on his way from Muzaffarpur to Gaya on his master's business when he was taken ill in the train. As he got worse on the board, the ferry steamer, he had crawled ashore to die on the banks of the sacred Ganges. Lala is the name of the man who comes to end his life with the disease cholera. He was doing a flourishing grain business. He made the stranger as his partner, and after a few years of successful business, this stranger come partner deserted him. On his return from the long journey, Lala found his shop empty and his partner gone. Lala did not expect this critical condition. He had little money with which he could pay his personal debts. He had no credit with him. His wife died after the partner robbed him. He worked under the merchant with whom he had traded. For 10 years he worked as a man earning 7 rupees a month. Lalajee had come into contact with cholera in the train when he was on his way from Muzaffarpur to Gaya on his master's errand. His condition grew worse on board of a ferry steamer. He slowly disembarked from the steamer and crawled close to the sacred waters of Ganges and prayed for his death. Lalajee, I never knew him by any other name, stayed with me for about a month, and then one day he requested permission to continue his journey to Gaya. The request was made as we were walking through the sheds, for Lalajee was strong enough now to accompany me for a short distance each morning when I set out for work, and when I asked him what he would do if, on arrival at Gaya, he found his master had filled his place. He said he would try to find other employment. Why not try to get someone to help you to be a merchant again? I asked, and he replied, I thought of being a merchant once again and able to educate my son is with me eh, night and day, Sahib, but there is no one in all the world who would trust me, a servant on 7 rupees a month and without any security to offer. With the 500 rupees, I should need to give a new start. Lalaji stayed with him for nearly 1 month. Then he requested him to give permission to continue his journey to Gaya. He wished to find other employment. When the narrator asked him to be a merchant once again, the narrator replied that he wished to be a merchant, but he needed 500 rupees to begin his new business. The train for Gaya left at 8 p.m., and when that evening I returned to the bungalow, a little before that hour, I found Lalaji with freshly washed clothes and a bundle in his hand a little bigger than the one he had arrived with, waiting in the veranda to say goodbye to me. When I put a ticket for Gaya and 100 rupee notes into his hand, he, like the man with the cold, grim face, was tongue tied. All he could do was to keep glancing from the notes in his hand to my face until the bell that warned passengers the train would leave in 5 minutes' range. Then, putting his head on my feet, he said, Within 1 year, your slave will return you this money. When the narrator handed him 100 rupee notes, he was tongue tied. He kept glancing at the notes until the bell of the train rang. He promised within a year he would return the money. And so Lalaji left me, taking with him the greater part of my savings. And I would see him again, I never doubted, for the poor of India never forget a kindness. But the promise Lalaji had made was, I felt sure, beyond his powers of accomplishment. In this I was wrong, for returning late one evening, I saw a man dressed in spotless white standing in my veranda. The light from the room behind him was in my eyes, and I did not recognize him until he spoke. It was Lalaji, come a few days before the expiry of the time he had set himself. That night, as he sat on the floor near my chair, he told me of his trading transactions and the success that had attended him. Starting with a few bags of grain and being content with a profit of only 4 annas per bag, he had gradually and steadily built up his business until he was able to deal in consignments up to 30 tons in weight, on which he was making a profit of 3 rupees per ton. His son was in a good school, and as he could now afford to keep a wife, he had married the daughter of a rich merchant of Patna. All this he had accomplished in a little under 12 months. As the time drew near for his train to leave, he laid 5 100 rupee notes on my knee. Then he took a bag from his pocket, held it out to me, and said, This is the interest, calculated at 25%, that I owe you on the money you lent me. I believe I deprived him of half the pleasure he had anticipated from his visit when I told him it was not our custom to accept interest from our friends. The narrator had given the greater part of his savings to Lalaji. He believed that the poor people in India will not forget the kindness. One day he noticed a man in pure white clothes standing in his veranda to meet him. He failed to realize until he spoke. It was Lalaji who came as he had set time limit for himself. He narrated his trading transactions by sitting on the floor beside his chair. Lalaji had gradually made progress in his business. His son now studied in a good school. He married again, a daughter of a rich merchant in Patna. Within 12 months' time, everything changed in his life. He returned his 500 rupees he had taken along with the interest, but the narrator refused to accept the interest, saying it was not their custom to accept interest from friends. Before leaving me, Lalaji said, "During the month I stayed with you, I had talks with your servants and with your workmen, and I learned from them that there was a time when you were reduced to one chapati and a little dal. If such a time should ever come again, which Parmeshwar forbid, your slave will place all that he has at your feet." Before leaving from this place, Lalaji told him of his willingness to help him in case there is a time of misery in his life, as he heard from the narrator's servants that he was reduced to one chapati and a little dal once in his life. He says, if such a time should ever come into your life, your slave will place all that he has at your feet. Until I left Mukame Ghat 11 years later, I received each year a big basket of the choicest mangoes from Lalaji's garden, for he attained his ambition of becoming a merchant once again and returned to the home he had left when his partner robbed him. Even after 11 years of this incident, each year the narrator received a big basket of best mangoes from Lalaji's garden. He aimed to be the merchant once again in his life after he had been robbed by his partner. As he returned to his position, he showed his gratitude to the narrator each year, reminding him of the kindness and his helping nature. Life consists of ups and downs. One should not lose hope, even when one faces misfortunes continuously in one's life. One should not lose hope ever. He should understand that God is bettering his life. It is his confidence that helps him recover his health. It is this confidence he continues his life. It is because of his hope he comes back as a successful merchant, a man with rich health, a man with his own family. Everything becomes possible because of his hope.